Hi, everybody. My name's Lia Delaney. I'm a fourth-year medical student at the University of Michigan, and as was announced, I'll be talking about some work that we did over the last year, a pilot study titled Improved Hernia Variable Communication Across a Statewide Collaborative. So we have no conflicts of interest to disclose, but of note, this work was funded very generously by the SAGES Medical Student Award in 2020. So, as we all know, abdominal hernia repairs are one of the most common operations performed in the United States every year. They're also associated with a high recurrence rate and complication rate. And although documentation variability exists across all surgical domains, this is really pertinent among abdominal hernia repairs because of the different possible operations and styles that occur for the surgeries. And we know even more that up to 2/3 of operative notes for hernia repairs are missing at least one key element. So this really leads to a lack of intraoperative details at the population level. And that further impedes both our understanding of best practices as well as our understanding as we reoperate on these patients. Because what we do know about hernia repairs is that a successful operation is dependent on the right operation at the right time for the right patient. So what we aim to do is really increase documentation as well as communication at a statewide level. And we did this through the implementation of a Synoptic operative note with the hope of both improving the documentation at a patient level as well as creating a more robust, clinically nuanced registry across the state. And so a little bit about Synoptic operative notes. What it is in its essence is a predefined electronic template. It has sections. You can see excerpts from ours here for different operative details and key steps. And they've been shown in different surgical domains to both reduce variability between notes as well as increase documentation across the board. Although there has been success, it really hasn't been widely adopted, and particularly not in domains such as hernia repairs where we don't understand best practices and there's a lot of work to be done. So this study was conducted within the Michigan Surgical Quality Collaborative, which is a collaborative of about 70 hospitals in the state of Michigan that have implemented various quality improvement campaigns and also are associated with a variable registry. In January of 2020, we expanded this registry and added hernia-specific intraoperative variables, things like hernia width, hernia size, the number of recurrences. We launched this with site representatives across the state, and this allowed us to, at this time, all sites were able to enter the data into the registry, which really allowed us to have a basal understanding of what the impact of a registry expansion would do for variable communication without the Synoptic operative note. So then we implemented the Synoptic operative note at 8 of these MSQC sites. These were diverse sites as far as location, patient population, and we engaged with two main groups through this intervention, both surgeon champions who volunteered at each site to both advocate for the note and launch it with their team, as well as data abstractors who were responsible from taking the data from the operative notes themselves and adding them to the variable registry. So through the 6-month period, we had continuous communication with these groups. We asked the surgeons and the data abstractors for iterative feedback on both the note itself as well as the process of data abstraction and the process of collecting the data. We had education sessions with the data abstractors about the process of a hernia repair, what the key variables were, and why it was important that we were collecting them. And because of the diversity of the sites, we also provided various different note formats, so electronic, an EPIC-compatible one, as well as paper templates. To evaluate the intervention at 6 months, we really looked at the communication of these hernia-specific variables that were new to the registry. We collected data on all hernia repairs that were conducted in the state of Michigan through MSQC for those 6 months, from January to June 2020. And then we compared the missingness of these variables from the pilot to the non-pilot sites. At 6 months, 870 hernia repairs had been conducted, 157 at the pilot sites, and non-pilot sites a little over 700. What we first looked at was the number of cases or operative notes that had every single hernia variable present. We found that at the pilot sites, 46% of those notes in those cases had every single variable that we had added, compared to the non-pilot sites, which about 20% did. And then we looked at which cases and which notes were missing every single variable that we had added, and found that at the pilot sites, 0% of the cases were missing all of them, and at non-pilot sites, about 3%. Then we wanted to look a little bit more at the missingness of these individual variables themselves and to see what the changes were. And so these are the variables that we added to the registry and chose to compare in the pilot and non-pilot sites. And what you can see here is that every single variable at 6 months, except for mesh used, had decreased significantly with the use of the Synoptic operative note, as well as the implementation efforts that went along with it. And so in conclusion, we were able to both increase communication as well as documentation of these key hernia elements at 6 months. And we did this through the deployment of a Synoptic operative note, as well as the implementation efforts that were concurrent with it. We really believe that upscaling the utilization of this note could really standardize communication further and allow for both better research of kind of the best practices in hernia repair, as well as more knowledge going into these reoperations with patients. And what we hope to do in the future, and what is ongoing right now, is kind of a further look at both the barriers and the facilitators of what the implementation effort was successful at, and hoping to, as we kind of scale this across the state, do it with more intention and really focus on those high facilitator aspects. Thank you all for listening, and thank you to a great team.